Now, reactions have continued to trail World Bank's suggestion that the country continue its economic reforms for another 10 to 15 years. The World Bank Senior Vice President, Ndemi Gill, believes Nigeria is on the right track with its economic reforms and should stick to it for the long haul to transform the economy. The proposed reforms include removing petrol subsidies, devaluing the local currency, increasing tariffs on utilities like electricity, and raising taxes. But the Nigerian economists and financial experts argue that these measures would exacerbate the already dire economic situation, particularly for low-income households. Now let's talk more on this by speaking with an economic analyst, Okenwa, who is joining me on the news. Thank you so much for joining us. Looking at what the World Bank has said, he's expressed optimism about Nigeria's direction on these reforms. But Nigerian economists and financial experts seem less convinced. Could you help us understand where the divergence in opinion lies and whether Nigeria should adopt a more localized approach to its economic strategy?
Yeah, I think at the moment, why there is counter opinions across the nation is simply because in initiating reforms, you have to match that with realities. The reality is in two dimensions. Most Nigerians are low-income earners at the moment, and Nigeria as a nation is quite low on productivity. And you know that some of these reforms, like the floating of the naira and all the rest, is usually a direct economic policies to enhance and influence local production, and that has not happened. And that, to a very great extent, is exacerbating the current economic situation. And where Mr. President now needs to look at, and some of the complaints and views from those within would be, it's not just enough for the reforms. Yeah, reforms in itself is very good, but of course the outcomes, managing the outcomes and managing the reforms properly in such a way that it doesn't have unintended consequences. And we can say that yes, even though Mr. President came up with some of these reforms, but some of these, some of the current hardship we see in the nation, we are not anticipated. So Mr. President should be able to look within at this point, evaluate the level of hardship, the level of misery index in the land, and then be able to work with the local content that we have within to see how to manage these situations, enhance production, see how many young Nigerians could get involved, could be engaged. And with that, I mean, when Nigerians become high earning, then of course paying some of those tariffs will not really be a challenge.
Yeah.
But where you have low income earners paying high on fuel, on electricity tariff, on VAT and all the rest, make the situations more difficult.
All right. So the World Bank actually suggests a 10 to 15-year timeline for the reforms to bear fruit. But is there a possibility that Nigeria's current economic challenges, such as the rising unemployment and poverty, require more immediate relief? I mean, could a shorter term approach be more appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, as a nation, I mean, the World Bank has offered their own advice. And I'm sure that perhaps the World Bank was not ill-intended. Perhaps the World Bank is also just concentrated on the long-term outcomes. But in the immediate, if we actually allow things to go in the current trajectory for the next 10 years, I mean, it's really going to account for untold hardship more and more on Nigerians. So what I think should be in the immediate would be fix all the refineries like Mr. President is currently doing, right? Enhance production, incentivize manufacturing within Nigeria. So all those that are doing one thing or the other to see how, as an economy, we can stand very strong. We can increase our export capacity. Right. All of those aspects of the economy should be incentivized by Mr. President. And with that, it's going to bring some level of immediate succor to suffering Nigerians. Right.
Mr. Okenwa, Nigeria's economy operates in a unique context with significant reliance on oil, large informal sectors, the MSMEs, and political instability in certain regions. To what extent do you think Nigeria should actually rely on global financial institutions like World Bank for its economic policy as against developing a more tailored domestic approach? Very quickly, less than a minute if you can.
Yeah, so I would say it's a 50-50 approach. I mean, the World Bank there is, you know, there is Six for development, and even when they are offering loans to nations, there are advice on that loan. There are expected reforms. The World Bank don't want you like you come all of the time to collect loans, and perhaps you are not even using it for capital projects or things that are results to development. So we should listen to World Bank, especially when it has to do with building an economy that is sustainable. They come up with sustainable model because the truth of the matter is that if you don't increase all of those tariffs, while your debt keep on growing, there's no way you can actually manage, right? There's no way you can actually manage your debt, right? So it's clear. So we listen to them on one end, but on our own, we should be able to look within introspection,
Right.
you know, to find out what really works for us and do that, of course.
That's right. Thank you very much, economic analyst Chukwuma Okenwa. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now,